Pokémon Mystery Dungeon, the longest-running spin-off series of the Pokémon franchise. Unbeknownst to a decent chunk of people, PMD is actually part of a much larger franchise, the Mystery Dungeon series. The development history of the first two PMD games, them being Red Rescue Team and Blue Rescue Team, pretty much revolve around this fact. Enter Koichi Nakamura, a programmer who would go on to found the video game company of Chunsoft in 1984. The company was never a huge name or anything, but they would give birth to the Mystery Dungeon games, a roguelike dungeon crawler series heavily inspired by Rogue. Though the series had its own original universe in the form of Sheer and the Wanderer, Mystery Dungeon was unique in that it crossovered with other series like Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy. Fast forward to this guy, Tsunekazu Ishihara, better known as the Big Cheese of the Pokemon Company. Ishihara played a handful of Chunsoft's games, including the Mystery Dungeon games, thinking them rather neat, and also had experience working with the guys over at Chunsoft, including Nakamura himself. As a result, Ishihara would become connected with the staff over there, specifically Seichiro Nagahata and Shinichiro Otomi, who asked if a Pokemon crossover with Mystery Dungeon was possible. And that's pretty much how I was able to dig up on the history of Red and Blue Rescue Team, just a bunch of pretty wacky coincidences leading to the eventual beginning of development for these games. Announced on August 9th, 2005 for the Game Boy Advance and Nintendo DS, then releasing 3 months later in Japan and 13 months later in America, the games became a hit and saved Chunsoft from going dead. Now that I'm done going on about the development history of the game, let's go over Teal's development history. Rescue Team wasn't my first Mystery Dungeon game, but actually my third. I started with Gates to Infinity and then played the tiniest bit of Super. Several years later, I'd played Blue Rescue Team, and I would say I really like Rescue Team, while also only ever playing like 3 hours of it. Then in the winter of 2019, I went and got the game physically, and here we are now. By the way, yeah, there are 2 different versions of this game, and yeah, they're on 2 different consoles. I don't think too many people are gonna knock down my doors telling me Red Rescue Team is better than Blue. The latter's got a bigger resolution, clearer audio, and is an easier game to find. Also, I had to bust out the big ol' scary emulator to record this game, since I don't have a capture card or anything. Like I said, I already own this game physically, as well as all the other Mystery Dungeon games, and I may or may not be able to say that for every game in the future, but this time, I think I should be in the clear. That all being said, let's finally see if this game is worth playing. The game starts off with a personality test. Basically, a bunch of random questions are thrown at you, and your answers will dictate which nature you have. The nature you're given will then determine which Pokemon you are. Yeah! Rather than play as a human trainer who commands Pokemon, you are the green gecko. I really like the setup of this. The questions tend to be pretty fun, some even pretty wild, and it's such a unique and fun way of giving you your protagonist. Yeah, if you want a specific Pokemon, then this kind of blows and is really stupid, but answering honestly or just answering whatever for the heck of it is so much fun. Then you get to choose your partner Pokemon. This little loser will stick with you for the remainder of the game, so I chose me a Waterman. His name will be Kruk, because who doesn't want a best friend named Kruk? And in we go! After a brief little snooze fest, we awaken into the big and horrifying world of Pokemon. Greeted by our best man, Sir Kruk, we learn that I have indeed lost my human skin, and am now a Trico for no particular reason. A series of confusion ensues, as well as a healthy dose of bullying, but then we're prompted to remember what our name is. Well, no point in lying. After another relentless round of harassment, a Butterfree flies her way on over to us and announces to the world that she has in fact lost her child. With nothing better to do, Kruk and I agree to save the little baby man in the first dungeon, Tiny Woods. Blam, this is the part of the video now where I talk about gameplay. So how in the world does a Pokemon Mystery Dungeon play? Well, the most simple way to describe it is to take traditional Pokemon combat, make it way faster, allow for much higher amounts of Pokemon, and have it all be grid-based. Each Pokemon has 1 or 2 types, and up to 4 moves with types of their own. So choosing the right move is essentially a gigantic, more convoluted version of rock, paper, scissors. Exclusive to Mystery Dungeon is having an infinite typeless attack, which is surprisingly reliable and good for wanting to hold off on using up your moves. If you've played a mainline Pokemon game before, you should know most of this stuff by now, but what really makes Mystery Dungeon special is how much speedier it is, and the grid-based system. Mainline, a battle between 2 Pokemon can feel like forever. Here, murder has never been so quick. Since you're dealing with a lot more Pokemon at once, it just makes sense to speed up animations so the player doesn't die of boredom. Now, the grid-based movement of Mystery Dungeon is awesome. You don't just use a movement and hope to deal some damage anymore. Position matters, and where you, your partners, and enemies are standing can make a big deal of difference. A lot of attacks will hit in front of you, but some have a 2-tile range, some a straight line, cut corners. This adds more depth to moves, so it's not just about the typing or the effects they do, but who and how you can hit enemies. Every floor has an unpredictable series of rooms and corridors, and your objective is to find the stairway in order to move on to the next floor. Sometimes you'll find the stairs immediately, and sometimes the combined forces of Arceus and God will smite you with the War's Luck known to man. Now, there isn't that much variety to the floors across a single dungeon. The layout is the biggest factor here. Any large differences are relegated to which dungeon you're at, not whatever the floor decides to spit at you. So things like music, visuals, the selection of Pokemon, items, and stuff like that is what changes up by the dungeon rather than floors. For example, Tiny Woods has enemy Pokemon that are easily puntable and only has 3 floors before you find the child. Hey, look, it's the child! With the pesky little insect rescued, we vamoose our way out of Tiny Woods and get showered with praise. Well, look at that! For saving this Butterfree's child, we get thanks and the admiration of said child? What a steal! We're also given a bunch of items, 2 of which are useless, yada yada. And with that, the amount of things going on in Mud's life took a sharp drop from 1 to 0. I've got no home, no task to do, and only one Kruk. Kruk responds by giving me a house. After a brief session of tail wagging for myself, Kruk over here informs me that natural disasters have run rampant in this world, and Caterpie was only one of many victims to mildly inconvenient happenings. Looks like Kruk really liked the cut of my jib back in Tiny Woods Yonder, so after a very brief period of whining for myself, the 2 of us form a rescue team together to start rescuing folks. Combining our 2 names together, we form the invincible force of Team Crud. Following a double whopper of sleep from Mud, a few things arrived to Team Crud in the morning. A rescue team badge, a toolbox, and a worthless collection of papers. We also get our first rescue mission. Uh-oh, I smell more gameplay exposition! With the addition of the toolbox comes the ability to collect a whole bunch of items. Though Mystery Dungeon is defined by the grid-based movement and all that, I believe the items are what makes it truly its own. Up to 20 items can be carried into a dungeon, and yeah, that's a pretty small amount even compared to some older entries, but individual items carry a lot of power behind them. Oran Berries are your go-to items for restoring buttloads of health, and other items can remove status effects, or restore the PP of your moves, maybe even be thrown at far-off enemies to harass them. There's also the Seeds and Wonder Orbs, the former affecting one Pokemon and the latter working across an entire room. These things are really important and do things like take you out of dungeons in a pinch, warp all enemies out of the room in the case of a really pinchy pinch, or grant you the ability to live. There's also Blast Seeds in this game. If you've ever used them in real life, you know how they work in Mystery Dungeon. Proper management of items is the name of the game for Mystery Dungeon, at least in my opinion, and nowhere is that more prevalent than the management of hunger. You've got to eat apples to stay in tippity-top shape, and if you do the opposite of that, you will eventually start to die of poor resourcefulness. You can totally see this as an artificial way to make the game more difficult, but I personally perceive this as just another layer of item management. You can't just bring all the items you want, but also some food to keep you supplied. Granted, with the 20 item limit, you can't really bring anything fancy with you anyway, and that's kind of a serious issue. This here is what I bring with me nearly every dungeon, and that's half my inventory right there. So yeah, kinda lame, but that doesn't make it too much less fun. Keeping track of the items you bring with you, as well as finding items in dungeons themselves, makes for a really fun gameplay loop in my probably stupid head. You can also use Poke, aka this game's money, to buy items from Kekland and Kekland Purple over here, among other things. Speaking of which, say a big ol' hello to Pokemon Square! After rescuing the dudes with Caps Lock, this place is unlocked for us to shop until several holes have been burned into our wallet. You've got the aforementioned Kekland shop, which is a good source for stuff like Reviver Seeds, Apples, Wonder Orbs, as well as TMs, which let you teach specific moves onto Pokemon. You've got the Kangaskhan storage for storing gargantuan amounts of items and taking out not so gargantuan amounts of items. The Felicity Bank keeps your money, and the Link shop can help you remember forgotten moves and link 2 moves together. Basically, the first move will go first and the second goes second. What shock! Anyway, there's also the Makihita Dojo, which is supposed to be a good way to give experience to Pokemon, and it's actually pretty god-awful. And then there's this dude who hangs in this little pond. Finally, the Pelipper Post Office exists to let you rescue others in dungeons, with friends if you're moral, or with a generated passcode if you're me and any other Mystery Dungeon fan. This is also where you can get rescue missions, and is how you waste your time with this game. Go to a dungeon, and then you'll either save someone, find an item, give an item, or escort someone. The escort missions are the absolute pits, but are usually more rewarding. The missions where you find items are really funny, because I found out at some point that you can just take an item from storage, then place it on the floor and immediately pick it back up, and it counts as you find the item. Neat stuff! Clearing a mission will always give you rescue team points, which let you upgrade your status, and are mostly there to brag to your friends. You'll also get a combination of items and or money. You can take multiple missions at a time as long as they're in the same dungeon, and that's about it. When you're not doing anything story related, this is likely what you'll be doing in this game, and I have a lot of fun with it. It would have been nice to have an incentive to upgrade your status rank, but getting more money, points, and things like Reviver Seeds and Gummies is what they call dopamine inducing. Wait a minute, I sense an inconsistency in features of this game being introduced proper. What in the world is a gummy? Glad you asked, because I'm going to talk about something entirely unrelated first. After going to Mountain Steel as a part of a request from this dude to save yet another child who has a lot of ambiguity regarding his feet, we eventually unlock the ability to recruit Pokemon. These two Magnemite dudes from Minutes Yonder help out and then ask for another home from Kruk, who I'm assuming heard about his past escapades with homeowning. Unfortunately, Kruk sheeped out, so a day later we had to resort to buying friend areas from Wigglytuff over there, which unlocks being able to recruit Pokemon, at least under very specific circumstances. More on that in a hot bit. But yeah, if the leader of the team, which is me, that's me, knocks down an enemy from a maximum of 1 tile away, there is a chance that said enemy will want to join your team. Then, if you manage to keep them from being not dead till the end of the dungeon, they will permanently join your team. Being able to recruit a team of up to 4 at once, but only being able to bring 3 at once for some reason, recruiting changes the game up quite a bit. As an alternative to standard Pokemon catching in the mainline games, I really dig the randomness factor of recruitment. You can never be too sure who's going to want to join your team, and as a result, this adds to the game's replayability. I never got Sudowoodo to join my team before, but Birch soon became an admired member of Team Crud, until I eventually forgot about him later in the game. Being able to build up your own posse and see them all together is just pretty sweet. Also important to note is that multiple Pokemon of the same species no longer differentiate in stats. They are predetermined for the species, and only what you do with their moves, held items, etc. will matter. For a more single-player oriented experience, this just makes total sense. Plus, the majority of Pokemon will help out. Some are better than others, but as teammates, they will usually pull their weight. Guess who's not finished talking about gameplay mechanics? So I mentioned prior that Wigglytuff is your source for friend areas. Well, what, who, why, when, and most importantly, how is a friend area? Transfer large amounts of your cash money to this pink glob, and you will purchase the rights to enter a single friend area. Every Pokemon has an associated friend area, and once their respective area is unlocked, you can recruit them, and this is where they will stay unless you kick them out. Within a friend area, you can give your teammates gummies, check their stats and stuff, or let them in on the fun journey you're about to embark on. Now, which one of these was the unpopular opinion switch again? There we go! Sorry about that. I had to warn you, myself, and the surrounding protesters of my incoming unpopular opinion, in which this orange alarm signifies that. The orange color is symbolic in that, if orange is your favorite color, well, this is where your opinion belongs. Friend areas blow. Like, okay, everyone loves them because you're able to explore them and get to see all your Pokemon peeps in all these neat little habitats. I do agree that the best part of purchasing new friend areas is getting to see what they all look like. There's a good amount of variety to these places, and some are very distinct. Some of these places look bad, and some look totally okay, but a good amount of them look really pretty, and are chill places to come back to even after the first time visiting. Plus, there's a ton of songs made for the friend areas, and they're really good. The problems start kicking in once you take that factor of exploring these friend areas and kick that all away. What you're left with is a pretty inconvenient means of getting your friends to join you on expeditions. Yeah, these places may look pretty, but I dread having to find certain teammates in some of these places. Once you're in a friend area, you can only get the Pokemon of that specific area to join your team. If you want to find other Pokemon you want along for the ride, you gotta go back out and into another friend area, which is what I like to call rather stupid and lame. But if you want stupid and lame to the power of ultra dumb, check this out. Every day, your teammates will skedaddle on out of your team and force you to force them into rejoining your team. Why? There is no benefit to this. You can already have teammates stand by from outside of friend areas, so why further waste time by taking Pokemon you want to keep in your team out of your team? That's stupid and bogus. Plus, this is all without mentioning that the very nature of the friend area's benefit, that being the ability to recruit specific chunks of Pokemon species, is unnecessary in and of itself. Sorry to jump the gun here, but every other PMD game that follows the recruitment system lets you recruit anybody immediately. Breaking up the 386 types of Pokemon into dozens of smaller groups is really limiting, and downright idiotic when it comes to legendary Pokemon. Some legendaries will be recruited no matter what and have their friend area immediately handed over, but some must have their friend area purchased before attempting to recruit them, and said friend area is likely occupied by just that one legendary, so spending over 8,000 Poke seems just a little excessive, does it not? Yes, I dig how cool some of these places look, but all in all, friend areas are just a massive waste of time that really did not need to exist. I feel like all the time that went into making these places probably could have been spent on just about any other part of the game, and no one would really whine about it. Mostly since, in that case, friend areas wouldn't have ever existed, but ignore my poor train of thought. Well, with that rambling hush over, holy crap, I think we're finally out the gameplay zone. Well, real quick, I may as well give the graphics and music some shouting and yelling at. Back then, critics hated how this game looked, since it looked like a GBA game despite being on the DS. Oops. Of course, now that the 2D era of the series has passed, it's much easier to appreciate the look and feel of Rescue Team. Sprites for Pokemon are used both for overworld areas and the dungeons themselves, and that's what I like to call super neat. The portraits used in cutscenes are pretty much a staple of the series now, and they are super cute and adorable. If you say otherwise, expect to notice by your doorstep. As I mentioned before, some places can look either real pretty or real ugly, but all in all, I'd say this game has pretty alright graphics. Likewise alright is the game's music. Now, I'll be talking more about specific songs as they come up, but in general, the tracks pretty much always fit the mood. Nothing's ever bad here, and nothing's unfitting either. Rescue Team loves its chiptune bass in a bunch of songs, and it's pretty sweet. Also, PMD is known for having great usage of leitmotifs, and while it's not as effective as later entries, Rescue Team still does follow suit, like with the main theme. My biggest issue with this game's soundtrack is that some songs, especially for dungeons, can have relatively forgettable melodies, and a lot of songs have a big bad case of repetitious melodies, like with Mr. Mount Steel over here. But whenever a song is just okay, there's also a song that's pretty very okay. Pokemon Square is a great theme that you'll hear for like 70% of the game, and the boss theme, that's been in every other game since, originated here. So yeah, the soundtrack as a whole is pretty alright, as are the graphics, so good job Rescue Team, you've successfully nailed the concept of being perfectly average. But okay, it's been a bit since I went on about the story of this game. To be blunt, Rescue Team doesn't have much of a story to call its own. The main premise is we're trying to figure out how we got into this mess in the first place, but up until now, it's mostly just been rescue missions and scuffles with these total prunes, Team Meanies, though most prominently the big bad man himself, Gengar. Remember that child we saved a while back? Yeah, so apparently he spread the disease of being lost in random forest syndrome, and now we have to race Gengar to save his friend. What ensues is a wide collection of whams and kerchows and everything in between. Also transpiring is the rescue of Jumpluff. This guy named Shiftry over here was a little too cool to rescue him, and was eventually told off by Team ACT, a highly regarded team consisting of the bully, the jock, and the nerd. As a result, Shiftry goes and Shameless save the guy, but whoa, looks like he had a little accident, so Krek and I briefly fake a stomach illness before going in ourselves and being disappointed at how fruitless our journey ended up being. So we trekked up an entirely different dungeon to not be disappointed this time, but get nearly slaughtered by a giant Thunderbird. Cheating death and killing him after I hid behind my comrades, Team ACT pops in and admires my incredible talent and looks, while also pondering about my origins. Alexam then tells me to schmove on over to Great Canyon, where supposedly more will be learned about how he came to be here. Very interesting, I think and say to myself, so on to Great Canyon we go. We arrive on the scene and the best song in the game plays. Gosh, this song is so good. It's all yeehaw and adventurous and all, but there's this little touch of grand and forebodingness to it, which, spoiler warning, will be making sense soon. And it will be making sense now! Meet Xatu! This guy's a little whacked in the head, which is why I offered the idea to viciously jump him. Unfortunately, he starts to go off on a long rant before he gets to try that. Big newsflash, he knows that I'm a human, and bigger newsflash, me becoming a human is apparently related to all the natural disasters that's been happening of late. Well, that's no good, but wait, there's more! Not only that, but because my presence in this world refuses to go away, soon the greatest of catastrophes that shall destroy the very world we live in is only but a matter of time. Now that is some pretty nasty stuff. Luckily, there is at least one bit of good news that has come out of this convo, and that's that apparently Gengar over here was spying on us. Maybe he'll throw in a good word for us. The next day, Krek seems to be falling down under the bad case of depression. The world may possibly be destroyed, and it's all my fault, as usual. Luckily, Krek starts to ask some questions that I do have answers to, like what the balance of the world is. It's in space, says myself, but unfortunately no surrounding parties, including me, him, or Pelipper over there, are willing to check it out. Now I'm depressed that Kruk won't believe me, so I decided to blow off some steam by listening to Whiscash's stories in this little pond. But even that backfires! Apparently a Pokemon named Ninetales existed, and touching its tail would cause a human to become cursed, but some loser decided to hide behind his Gardevoir buddy for it to take the curse instead. As a result, this human would become super ultra cursed by transforming into a Pokemon. Oh, and also disturbing the balance of the world. I don't know about you, but I have a sneaking suspicion that sounds like me, and I'm not a fan of that. Well, it doesn't seem like Kruk was sure of what to think of that story, so I decided to let him listen to it again so he could get his words out. All that ended up happening was even further depression. There's a short scene that gets carried out right here, where Kruk admits that he doubted if Mud was or was not the human described in Whiscash's story. It's pretty nice to see that even with some pretty danging, darning, and damning evidence, he still trusts in him. Then the night falls, and I've neglected to mention that a bunch of dreams have been happening as of late, and we very slowly learn who and what's going on in these stupid dreams. First, nothing happens. Second, nothing happens again, but with an earthquake. This one time, there was a green monster. But in tonight's stream, we finally learn that this Pokemon's name is Gardevoir. Uh-oh. After waking up, Kruk and I head into Pokemon Square, and immediately we notice that there's a big old lack of fun and noise in town. It's empty, and it's all because of Gengar over here raising a stink about something no one cares about. He tells everyone in town about how he saw Xatu talk about the human who turned into a Pokemon, and how that's causing all the natural disasters of the world to occur, including a big final blam wham that will destroy the world. All the townsfolk realize that everything about this is just like the tale from Whiscash. Everything about this scene is pretty dang chilling, and really well acted too. You can see Mud and Kruk staring at each other all nervous, Wigglytuff pronouncing about what I guess could be considered fear, and Gengar being absolutely relentless with his speech that's really starting to hurt my feelings now. Then he drops on the idea that if said transformed Pokemon is to be ridden of, the natural disasters will naturally come to an end. And at this very moment, when Gengar reveals to everyone that the Pokemon in question is in fact Mud. Everything from here onwards is where the story of Rescue Team, which was almost non-existent up to this point, truly becomes something special. Everyone in Pokemon Square immediately turns on us. The shopkeepers, the citizens, Lumber even throws down a punch. The tone of the game takes a massive shift right here, and on a first-time playthrough, heck even on repeat playthroughs, it is impressive how well this is executed. There's no other action for us but to retreat back home. Kruk wonders why Mud didn't try to defend himself, but everything that was mentioned in Whiscash's tale, as well as our dreams, seems to point to him being the big bad man. And the layers of pretty crappy things currently going on continues to build up as Team ACT comes in to tell us that all rescue teams, and eventually they themselves, are going to do their best in poofing us out of the world of Pokemon to restore balance to it. What they do allow us is one last day to make preparations to make way for answers. After taking their leave, apparently Mud's still feeling like absolute garbage, but Kruk reassures him that something else has to be the truth. Even Caterpie comes in and helps out with them making Mud not feel like Garbo-sesh. With enough motivating, we pick up our suitcase full of hope and resolve from where we last left it, and prepare for tomorrow by going to bed again. Dawn dawns, and everyone's asleep. After a pretty dramatic change in tone, this is probably the goofiest moment of the game, where you can buy stuff from shopkeepers in their sleep talk. They will explain to you their services and give you deeds to friend areas in their sleep. Now that is some darn impressive customer service. I even found some sleepyhead dialogue from Gulpin that made me depressed, wow! But enough of that, it's time to head on out. The journey ahead of us is a strictly two-man job. Only Mud and Kruk are playable for a while now, and we won't be seeing home nor Pokemon Square for a good bit of the game. But before we head out, everyone we'd ever rescued before visits us to wish us the best of luck. Caterpie, Metapod, Jumpluff, and Diglett are all here, and as much as I may have bullied them earlier, their company is relatively appreciated. Even Pelipper comes on over, wishing for a soon return. After a pretty gloomy last day, this bit right here gives you just that little bit of motivation and hope you need to get on out of there. And with a hearty goodbye, it's just you and your buddy, along for probably one of the worst rides of your life. The music that plays during this part is wonderful too. This is the introduction of this game's primary leitmotif, if a bit of a simple one, but this song does such a good job of making your transition as fugitives not one of hopelessness, but of a desire to discover the truth. And so begins this game's fugitive arc. With just you and your partner, you're stuck with the typings you've got. The two of you will probably be well leveled since you have to play as them in all the story dungeons, and even if you're not, there's a good amount of optional dungeons that infinitely loop to give you experience. As for the primary dungeons themselves, they will probably give you some trouble, because these places are not very polite to you. Except for Lapis Cave. Lapis Cave is a dungeon for babies. But without the ability to recruit Pokemon, bring Pokemon on over, buy items, and stuff like that, a first-time playthrough is probably going to make this a real tricky portion of the game. You can still store and take out items, but that's about it. You won't know what types of dungeons or enemies are coming up, or what items you might be able to find. As a result, you have to really master what you're already used to, and adapt to all the new places you'll be wanting to get the heck out of as soon as possible. Mount Blaze has a lot of Pokemon that can burn you, and enemy Pokemon have relatively high amounts of health at this point. Of course, I also managed to get some of the best luck I've ever had in my life with the stairways, so disregard everything I just said. By the way, you may have noticed something rather interesting. I am in a fire-based dungeon. I am grass. Contrary to popular belief, these two things do not go well together at all. Rescue Team is slightly infamous for giving grass types a real crappy time, which I guess is thematically appropriate with how awful much life just became. But anyway, I haven't talked about this game's bosses yet, and a lot of dungeons will be having them from here on out. Problem: 3 of the Pokemon they chose as bosses are the legendary Bird Trio, which, newsflash, are all flying types and thus are strong against me. Zapdos was able to be dealt with without any cheap tricks, but that was still after using up one of my Reviver Seeds. Moltres and Articuno though, Jesus Christ, they do not take to leaves kindly. Fire and Ice are both super effective against grass, and coupled with their flying types, this is basically as much of a nightmare as it can get for me. If you want to get past these guys, you'll have to make good use of items and status moves, or brute force it with heaps of Reviver Seeds. Luckily, there is a TM I found over here just before fighting Moltres, which teaches you Attract, and I believe almost any starter can learn it. Basically, it will infatuate any Pokemon you use it on, pretty much immobilizing them for several turns. Gender isn't a thing in this game for whatever reason, so it's basically one of the most overpowered moves you can get against bosses. I entirely believe that without Attract, I would not have been able to fight the majority of bosses in this game, and I'll get to bring up this guy later. Anyway, we were at least able to bring down Moltres and get past this fiery hell of a place. Krek and I take a bit of time to rest up and think about the terrifying dungeons we've just gone through, and how no one will be able to get to us now. That is, except for guys like Lombre, and Team ACT, I guess. Having this tiny spot to relax and think about the journey so far was a smart way to set in your mind just how your partner and even yourself are feeling, but hammering it in that there's still no other option but to keep moving forward. Case in point, Snowland! This is the epitome of moving on forward with little to no clue of what's ahead of us. We do get to see a Pokemon that I sense is going to have less than 10 lines of dialogue, but the music, Kruk's sneeze over here, and how empty everything is, it really feels like nothing can get worse than this. And that would be wrong, enter Frosty Forest. Okay, this dungeon is actually pretty easy, and there are some neat things about this place that I'll be talking about later, but Articuno, he's a flying type, we knew that already, and that kind of blows. Articuno, he's also an ice type, that mega blows. Combine flying and ice together, and oh my god, why would he do this to me? Articuno, he's a boss, so naturally he has a buttload of health. Articuno, he has the pressure ability, which means every attack you use takes 2 PP instead of 1, effectively cutting the amount of times you can attack by 2. Articuno, he has agility, which lets him move at double speed, or even triple or quadruple if he really wanted to. It also goes through infatuation status at a faster speed. Articuno, if he uses Gust on me, it kills me instantly. Articuno, he has a screen clearing move that does heaps of damage. Articuno said screen clearing move is an ice type attack. I'm pretty sure the devs knew how BS Articuno was, cause even after defeating him, he still plans on destroying us. Oh my god. Suddenly, Absol enters the scene, explaining to the idiot that the natural disasters happening are not because of us, but some greater force. Articuno decides to trust his word and gets away. Oh my god, thank god, my god. Thank you, Absol, says Kruk. Absol responds by being a jerkwad. Groan, says Kruk. And so, Eduardo the Absol joins our team. The 3 of us continue to trek on over, the snow being even worse than it was before. The feeling of loneliness is ramped up to the max here. No other Pokemon is in sight, and it really feels like being able to find anything that can prove our innocence is not even remotely possible now. Right here, where your partner asks what's gonna happen to them, I don't think I've ever chosen this top option right here. The fact that even Kruk, who's always been so optimistic about continuing on, is starting to feel the same that you probably are, really says something about how things are going. But he realizes pretty fast that losing that hope doesn't help one bit. The only thing that matters now is to believe that something good will come. Insert Gardevoir. Yeah, so apparently something good is coming. Thank you, Gardevoir. Soon, we will find a dungeon by the name of Mount Freeze, where Ninetales resides. Hey, I know that guy! By coming to him, all of our answers shall be discovered. I really like this scene because Kruk and Eduardo over here think I've become a lunatic. I know this is literally like 2 minutes after probably the most hopeless part of the whole journey, but I'm also a fan of this scene right before entering Mount Freeze, where Kruk seems so excited to finally discover the truth about this whole debacle, but Mud's still kinda horrified that something the opposite of good might come out. The only reason Kruk had to believe that Mud was not the human that abandoned Gardevoir, bringing doom and destruction to this world, is simply because he felt he was a good person ever since our meeting in Tiny Woods. I'm glad he feels that way. Mount Freeze was a relatively easy dungeon for me as well, but multi-hit attacks are stinky and bad and I hate them. One hit will usually do the same amount of damage as any other attack, so 9 times out of 10 you can expect to die from them. But other than that, we made it to the summit. Our reward for doing so is a dead end, as well as the company of Team ACT. How nice. After a battle that definitely will not become really funny and over the top in a remake 14 years later, we get interrupted by the one and only Ninetales. Confrontation follows soon after. What's the deal with Mud? Ninetales recounts the tale that some selfish human managed to get away from being cursed by having their Gardevoir partner take the curse instead, and ran away, eventually becoming a Pokemon. This human, the one the entirety of Pokemon Square sought out to destroy, is Mud. Wait, no, it's not Mud. When Kruk hears about Mud's innocence, it is the most adorable thing in the entire game. Kruk breathing in and out to control his excitement, dancing around Mud and rubbing it in how delightfully wrong and stupid Team ACT and everyone else was, seriously makes this whole journey worth it. You can see tears of joy in his portrait, and oh my god, this just turns every frown in the universe upside down. Also, Ninetales casually mentions that Xatu was just wrong about Mud's transformation and the world's balance ever being correlated. But wait a minute, if I'm not the bad human, why the heck did I turn into a Pokemon in the first place? After Kruk openly ponders about my very existence, we are very cruelly interrupted by— Is that an earthquake? Oh no! The natural disasters chose now of all times to get even worse, and according to Ninetales, a legendary Pokemon by the name of Groudon will wake up. That's no good. Luckily, Team ACT tells us that we're too puny and weak to handle Groudon right now, meaning we don't have to do anything. So after they leave, we leave and head back for Pokemon Square, finally ending our journey as fugitives. Back over at the town, we get to see that pretty much everyone except for Team ACT gave up on actually trying to hunt us down. The lack of music, shopkeepers, really makes it seem like while we were gone, Pokemon Square just became the most depressing place around. Gengar was too lazy to try and chase after me, and look who's back in town! This is probably just me, but there's something amusing about everyone inching away from Kruk and I, and then the first thing that comes out of Kruk's big mouth is, "Hi everyone!" Anyway, Kruk tells everyone that I am clean of any wrongdoings, and Gengar is a big fat loser. Gengar brings up an entirely reasonable point, which is that we need evidence to prove our innocence. Sadly for us, we've got none of that. But even so, everyone here seems to think that we're innocent anyway. Now, Shiftry and Caterpie, I can understand their train of thought. Snubbull, and especially Lombre? Bro, you tried to Falcon Punch my face! I think even dumber is that though everyone trusts in me, the one thing that's considered evidence for my innocence is not Apps over here, who was a witness to it all, but the newspaper. Like, okay. Well, I guess waste of paper turned out to save the day after all, so Gengar scurries off, which makes sense considering he's tonight's big loser. Not very long afterwards, and I mean really not long afterwards, our former rescue team business resumes like normal, as if this whole thing never happened in the first place. So yeah, with the rather traumatic experience from Mud and Kruk over with, the story goes back into the shell it came from, and we just do our thing for a few more days. Do more missions, recruit more Pokemon, all that usual stuff that happened before Xatu over here does a little thing. At some point, you will eventually get a request from Why Not and Wobbuffet to go into a dungeon called Upper Forest, a pretty short dungeon that has some real wacko weather effects. Weather doesn't matter too much in this game, unless it's hail or sandstorms, then all hell breaks loose. Upper Forest is also where this can happen for the first time. Help. Anyway, we make it to the end and beat up some unsuspecting Mankeys. Upon coming home, we inform Wynonna and Wobbuffet of the completed mission and in turn get cheaped out. Instead, we only get this incredibly useful chestnut that'll have a huge effect on the story in a few seconds. Gosh! And in come the Mankeys who plan on beating us up some more, but then saw that we had a chestnut on our hands. Never mind the fact that we actually have two. They ask for us to hand it over, we say no, we fight, they ask again, we say no again, repeat the beating up, then we finally give it to them. Kruk has a shine of brilliance here where he decides that after giving the main keys to Chestnut, he can make them work for the Chestnuts by turning them into slaves. Nice going, Kruk! So yeah, in turn for some Chestnuts, the Mankeys agree to start working on creating us a new and improved rescue team base. Ooh! Caterpie and the two blue men help out too, and this starts a process that I believe is optional? Go into the Uproar Forest a couple more times to get more Chestnuts, and sooner or later, you'll finally get to complete your team base. I've seen a lot of people talk about how tedious this all is because you have to go into Uproar Forest so many times. Now, I understand that what I'm about to say is still stupid and probably should have been tweaked by the devs, but even on my first playthrough, I got a Chestnut on my first visit to the dungeon, cutting down the number of revisits I had to make from 2 to 1. It would have been a lot better if it were 0 times no matter what, but I don't think it's that big of an issue as some make it out to be. Anyway, it doesn't take long for a rescue team base to become this. Oh! Yeah, this is kind of terrifying, but at least the indoors look real nice now. Genuine question, how many people learned that you can actually examine this map in the corner there? Now, one thing that's been going on before the next major story point is more dreams. Now that we know who Gardevoir is and what she does, we can finally start to ask some questions about when the world is going on. Gardevoir's curse forces her to begin watching over Mud as part of her role, and the same was the case back when she was with her awful and bad human partner. Despite saying that said human was indeed a not good person, she wouldn't and couldn't feel the need to separate herself from her partner. When Mud asks why, Gardevoir says that's simply what Gardevoirs as a species do. This right here is a great example of probably one of the neatest things about Rescue Team's story. Gardevoir will give its life to protect its trainer. Grabbing the tail of a Ninetales results in a curse. Absol has the power to sense natural disasters. Many of the major characters have their roles in the story based on their Pokédex entries, and are incredibly faithful to how they supposedly act according to these. This is just super neat in 8 different ways, and also plays into something Gardevoir mentions rather often, the role of people in Pokemon. Her role is to protect trainers, but Mud came into the world of Pokemon to fulfill a role not yet known to him. And before we get to learn what that role is, Earthquake! Now, a few days after coming back to Pokemon Square and doing rescue missions, a community meeting will transpire over in town, held by Shiftry. Shiftry is the man in Rescue Team, probably my favorite character other than the main dudes. He was a jerk, but being the total gamers we are, we saved him anyway, so he came to respect us even during our fun little exile. Now he's rounding up rescue teams to save Team ACT. Look at him! What a cool guy. Oh yeah, also Team ACT is still trying to fight Groudon. Whoops. So Shiftry and others have been afflicted with having concern for them, and as a result, try to get the best of the best to go and save them. Among the chosen members include the following. Not Mud and Kruk. Instead, the 3 who do go to fight Groudon are someone who's strong against Groudon, someone who's strong against Groudon, and someone who's weak against Groudon. Afterwards, everyone goes on their merry way, and this actually doesn't quite advance the story yet. At this point, I actually hadn't finished giving the Mankeys Chestnuts, but one more day of doing random rescues later, that soon changes. Blastoise, Octillery, and Golem. They all stunk! Everyone in Pokemon Square is absolutely mortified that even the best rescue team members were absolutely creamed from the dungeon down yonder. For no real reason, Gengar takes this as an opportunity to make everyone give up and go home. With the power of negativity, Gengar succeeds in making everyone feel ever so slightly more crappy than they did previously. Luckily, Kruk has the power of positivity, and decides that Gengar is a load of garbage. He puts on a little speech about going in to save the day no matter their power or experience, and everyone thinks he's really cool. Gengar's like, oh no no no, and the 3 wash-ups wake up and say, oh yeah! Absolutely pissed and horrified, Gengar scurries on out of there. At least, I think that's what happened in the last 2 minutes. So everyone goes and prepares to enter Magma Cavern, the dungeon of the main story I hate the most. Gardevoir shows up in another one of our dreams and promptly tells us that our role here as a Pokemon of this world is slowly but surely coming to its end. Well, that sucks. But whatever, we're finally able to go into Magma Cavern after millennia in 6 days. This place is pretty tough, but I do hope we'll be able to make it through. Holy crap, this went poorly. Yeah, so stuff like this can tear you apart at pretty much any moment now. I tried chatting with Kruk, but he couldn't talk just now. I never actually mentioned before that dying in a dungeon results in all your monies and half your items being lost, so you really don't want to die in this game. That makes it so the moments where you do survive are that much more exhilarating, and the moments where you don't, depression-inducing. Here's me dying in a dojo, great place for farming experience. Anyway, after a much less catastrophic run-through of Magma Cavern, we make it to Groudon and heckle him with moves that we've had since the beginning of the game. Groudon sneezes to death and Alakazam is saved. But only like 2 seconds after doing all that, another quake goes on. So with that, we race on out of there. Everyone in town is excited beyond belief about our ability to beat up giant red people. Kruk starts to cry and immediately gets bullied for it, and then These white flashes are being incredibly annoying, which can only mean one thing. It's Xatu! Xatu's talking to us through telepathy, aka invisible walkie-talkies, and he informs us of something pretty bad coming. I'm not sure why he started talking like Yoda, but whatever. So anyway, giant meteor. Well, this is an abrupt and last-minute way to reveal the big bad of this game, which, you know, is a big brown rock. But watch out, world! Only Mud and Kruk will be able to even think of destroying the meteor by trekking up a dungeon by the name of Sky Tower. There, we shall find Rayquaza's brother, Rayquaza, who will assist in its destruction. We've got one last day to prepare for the final dungeon of this game's story. That is, unless we happen to die there, then the meteor is kind enough to give us more time. Mud has one last dream to impede on his sleeping, but uh-oh! Gengar here is using Dream Eater on him to look into his dreams and make him feel bad. You can tell this is working because here in Mud's dream, it's filled to the brim with the color purple, which is bad. Luckily, Gardevoir swoops right in to rid Mud's mind of any and all purple, and discussions ensue. So, we finally get told what the role of Mud is in this horrifying world of Pokemon. Destroying that meteor that we've already planned to do next Tuesday is actually that very role. Before transforming into a Pokemon, Mud was supposedly asked by Gardevoir and possibly others to help save the Pokemon world. To see if he was up to snuff, Mud asked that he was put to a test in order to be deemed worthy of fulfilling out this meteor-destroying field task. This apparently involved turning into a furry for whatever reason, but thankfully, the Pokemon he transformed into was bipedal, so no issues arose, and thus he's been able to make it this far. Small little thing, however, once the meteor is dealt with, Mud will return back to his original world of flesh-filled humans, no questions asked. As a result, this will mean saying goodbye to Kruk. Of all the sucky things Gardevoir has said, this is definitely the most sucky of them. She also mentions an old friend of hers who similarly parted ways, but believes the two will meet up once again. Immediately after saying that, Gengar stops eavesdropping in on the dream and leaves in tears, and if you couldn't before, you can probably piece together what his deal is. I'm really mad at Chunsoft for not warning me in advance that this game would feature depression, but I'll file a complaint in some other time. Let's put that all behind us. It's time to scramble! Everyone cheers us on in hopes for safe travels, and Mud and Kruk head to Alakazam and Xatu. And Birch, can't forget Birch. With the combined assistance of Xatu, Alakazam, and a mysterious ghost-type Pokemon who left before we arrived. Gengar, this stinky little thing is created, the Teleport Gem. Basically, we can go to Sky Tower now after some real flickery-looking light shows. For the final time, we're asked if Kruk and I are truly prepared to head into hell, to which Kruk says yes, and to which Mud cries instead of answering, because of the whole leaving his best friend thing or whatever. The flickery light shows proceed, and here we are! This is easily the most difficult dungeon of the main storyline. Everyone here in general is a real toughie, and a lot of floors have the chance of hailing, which means you'll want to cry every few turns. And if that wasn't bad enough, here are some Pokemon that can move through walls and be almost impossible to attack without throwing items. Cool! Some of the types of species here are also total bullies, most notably Aerodactyl, who just stinks and blows. Altaria here can use agility and affect every Pokemon in the room, which in Monster House is Jesus. Even on repeat playthroughs, Sky Tower will likely give you a hard time. I managed to first try it here, but I remember one playthrough spending a whole evening just trying to get to the midway point so I could save. Now, I mentioned before that Magma Cavern is my least favorite dungeon of the story, not this place. Why would that be, you may ponder and think? Well... yeah, this song's pretty sweet. It gets you all excited to beat up some giant green floating lizards and pummel through all these stupid ghosts who should really be dead by now. Unrelated, there was a conga line here, and that was pretty fun. But no more delaying the inevitable. Kruk and I have finally made it to the peak of Sky Tower. In comes Rayquaza, the ruler of the skies, and he's in a real pissy mood right now. Kruk tries to talk him into helping us destroy the meteor, but in what I believe is a world record for Rayquaza's wanting to blow you up, Rayquaza decides he wants to blow us up. Then he pulls out a boombox and plays some jams. Rayquaza is a real toughie of a final boss. Shocker, he's yet another flying type, so at this point I think the devs burn grass in the daily. Like any other boss in the game, Rayquaza's got both big and large amounts of health, and big and large amounts of beating you up power. Coupled with being strong against grass types, as well as being resistant to most of the starter's primary types, he can do a real good job of dishing out the pain and watching your futile attacks do nothing. Also, I didn't have any reviver seeds and I freaked out so much about this that I kinda sorta maybe made a save state when I didn't even have to. Luckily, Rayquaza is no less weak to the overpowered combination of a green gecko's flirtiness and a crocodile's ability to look at him funny. With enough willpower and BS, Rayquaza goes down just like the rest of them. Rayquaza has a case of Articuno syndrome and refuses to back down, till the laws of nature are broken and an earthquake happens on Sky Tower. Kruk tells Rayquaza to look up. He finally agrees to go on about destroying the meteor, but asks why Kruk is chosen now of all times to do so, when both him and Mud would likely take quite a hefty blow. Luckily for all of Pokemon, Kruk is not feeling genocidal, and says that he'll go along with it no matter the cost. One Hyper Beam later, and the giant meteor is finally donezo, and Mud and Kruk pretty much die in the blast. Stuck in what's most likely limbo, Mud's kinda just stuck in a gray, gloomy void. Eventually, Gengar jumps in and makes fun of my corpse. He then drags my dead body in a rather morbid fashion to a place supposedly called the Dark World. I always felt the smidge scared when Mud had no clue where he was going to, but luckily, Gengar is a clumsy and amazing jerk who took a few steps off course. Apparently in the official guidebook of Limbo, that means going from hell to the land of not being dead. Mud and Kruk awake to a crowd filled to the brim with relief and excitement, and it seems like Kruk had the same little encounter with Gengar. Nice! But with their life successfully not being cut short tragically, the meteor was successful in being destroyed, and the world of Pokemon as we know it is officially in peace. What ensues is a totally adorable moment where everyone plays around and bullies Lombre for being the jerk he is. And then... yeah. If you finish any of the other Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, you know what's coming. Gardevoir appears beside Mud to tell him that with the meteor gone, it's time for him to take his leave. This is a scenario that would happen many more times in the series, but what Rescue Team does different is that almost everyone from town is here. All the friends that you made and Pokemon you helped out are there to witness your departure alongside your partner. Light begins to envelop Mud and the crowd starts to wonder what the heck is happening to him. For the only time in the game, Mud openly speaks to everyone, giving a speech about how he's no longer able to stay with the rest of them. Confusion runs rampant, understandably, but Kruk begins to get heartbroken. But Mud reassures him that though the time spent with him wasn't of the highest amount, it was an incredible time he had with the best friend he was so glad to be able to say he had. Nobody wants Mud to leave, especially with peace having just been won, and Kruk begins to tear up at the thought of it. But Mud has no other option, and too soon is whisked away to another world. Every other Mystery Dungeon game has some variant of this ending, but the community aspect of it, the simplicity and rawness to it, really makes it powerful, even for the first game. It's an unexpected ending that's incredibly sad, especially without knowing that it's coming, but it leaves an impact on you. Yeah, this game kinda has a post-game, so they yoink Mud back into the world of Pokemon with the power of wishing really hard. A pretty wholesome reunion occurs, and so ends the story of Rescue Team. Overall, as I've said before, the narrative of Rescue Team is one that's either non-existent or super memorable in specific instances. It's the least risky of any of the PMD games, plot-wise. As a result, you could say that compared to the successors of this game, there aren't any real lows to this story. Unless you consider this really stupid. Actually, I wouldn't blame you if you thought the Fugitive arc was resolved poorly or anything. But anyway, though the majority of this game is simply doing rescues and going about your merry way, the moments that are here are wonderful, and even during more subdued periods, something is almost always affecting another thing. Rescuing Caterpie is what led you to getting jobs from Magnemite, and Magnemite helped rescue Diglett, leading to the growth of your team. Rescuing Shiftry turns him into a different person entirely, and all the time you spend as a rescue team causes Pelipper to have a soft spot for Mud and Crud, ignoring the time this happened. I can't immediately recall any moment in this game that is genuinely pointless, even if it's less obvious than in future titles. Story-wise, yeah, I'd say this is probably my least favorite of the main four, but I'm sure the fact that there was never a real low point is quite appealing to some. For the first game in the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, and in a franchise that was at the time and sometimes even currently considered not great for storytelling, this is still a serviceable narrative that does the job done, and done well. I don't have an alarm for this, but uh-oh, I sense a major script change underway. I was originally going to talk about the post-game for like 20 minutes, but not only did it kind of seem like a waste of time to talk about the post-game story, which is a lot more simplified compared to the main campaigns, I also somehow ended up making it rushed anyway, so I felt it would be better overall if I made a quick little summary on the post-game instead. Plus, this video was already kinda, long. Blue Rescue Team's postgame is all about the freedom of gameplay. You quickly unlock the ability to evolve Pokemon, as well as customizing your team exactly to your liking. That's pretty sweet, and you can finally evolve your starters into big chunky men if you so choose. I usually don't, but this time I felt daring. I also don't usually change my team that much from Mud and Kruk, but the option is quite appreciated. What's not quite appreciated is another thingy that happens almost immediately in the postgame. Kruk tells you about making anyone the leader of your team, and then you try making him stand by. Yeah, this kinda makes him permanently exit your walking squad of 2, and I don't like this. We used to see each other every morning and go shopping together and watch fathers abandon their child together, and he just up and left. Wow! Well, let's put that trauma beside us and get to talking about the dungeons. One of the dumbest things is the inclusion of HMs, usually found in specific spots like here or there. Many dungeons in the postgame require that you either hold an HM or teach it onto a Pokemon, and combined with the 20 item limit, good god, I'm so glad they removed this in later games. Many places you'll be going into are real toughies, and they make me depressed from failure. Most notably, the postgame brings about this game's 99 floor dungeons. These are ultimate tests of endurance, and they're honestly a really fun time killer if you can get into them. With some chill music, a good amount of apples and max elixirs, and known before trying that things can go wrong at any moment, there's something real nice about throwing yourself at dozens of floors and getting ever closer to the end. Again, anything can go wrong, which is why moments like this leave me with the highest dose of depression a doctor has ever diagnosed, but that's simply part of the experience. Also, dungeons get more mechanics introduced solely for the purpose of making your life miserable. It's pretty fun. Outside the story, the main thing you'll probably be doing in the postgame is recruiting, which includes the newly available legendary Pokemon. With over 300 Pokemon to recruit, and some being exceedingly difficult to get your hands on, you'll definitely have your time occupied if you attempt to 100% this game. I'm pretty sure less than 0.1% of Earth's population has recruited Mew, and I'm part of that group. You have to beat up these blocky guys to assemble the music box, and have said music box on you, and pray that one of these lovely little floors will have Mew, who you can still miss if you don't find the poor guy. Fun fact, if you try interacting with the music box, this happens. How nice. Now, if recruiting Pokemon is not what you're doing, the post-game story is probably what you're after. Like I said before, however, I don't think it's really significant enough to go in depth about, and or gloss over and blow the video anyway. The most important event is right smack at the end, so I'll cap off the story talk of this spoilery 50-minute plus video by telling you to play the game for yourself to see the ending. Or, you know, YouTube's right there. So, other than recruiting Pokemon in the story, what exactly is there to do? Well, a decent amount of things. You can clear all the dojos to get sweet rewards, try to get all 4 of the achievement statues for your team base, save up money to buy the obscenely expensive friend areas, and of course, checking out the items at each of the stories daily, building up your inventory, and maybe even changing which Pokemon you bring along for upcoming journeys continues to be really fun from the main game, though it's pretty much the entire focus now. And, well, yeah, that's pretty much the point of Rescue Team's post-game, to be an extension of the gameplay, giving you lots of freedoms in how you approach dungeons and the like, with a lot less emphasis on the story. If you're into the gameplay, this can easily satisfy you for hours upon hours. Even just recording the essentials for this game, I doubled my playtime. But, well, that is if you can get behind the gameplay in the first place. The most divisive element of any Mystery Dungeon, no doubt, is the game mechanics. You will constantly see fans of the series who always say the story, music, all that is great, but the gameplay is completely and totally whatever. Though I personally disagree, it's easy to see why people would think that. The format of Mystery Dungeon is pretty antiquated at this point, not differing that much for around 3 decades, and if you're looking more for a style of gameplay that involves solving puzzles in super cool and unique dungeons, rather than what are essentially glorified endurance tests, these games don't win you over. However, if you can get into the swing of preparing up your inventory to ensure victory through dungeons and building up a team that can be shaped into whatever you so choose for that day, the amount of content from the post-game alone will keep you busy. Even if you can't get into the gameplay, that story is there, though as I said before, only really situationally. This isn't nearly as story-driven of a game as its sequel, so it likely won't satisfy you if you're already not a fan of the gameplay. Basically, I'll be blunt here. If you're looking for a game like Mystery Dungeon, whether because of the gameplay or the story, you're probably better off playing any other game in the series. Especially if you've already played, say, Explorers, you have little reason to play this game. What I believe Rescue Team does really well is being incredibly chill to pop on every now and then to go into some dungeons to recruit legendaries or get some rad items, whatever. It's the most casual feeling game in the series, I feel, and I kinda love that element Rescue Team has. Though it's probably safe to say it's the worst in the series, Rescue Team is still a beloved game of mine and to many others. For myself personally, it was the very game that got me hooked on Mystery Dungeon, and I'm so glad it did. I love the style of this series, the passionate as heck community, and I have this game to thank for being a gateway into all that. Again, the sequels take what this game started and expand on it a heck ton, and they also have better music, but you'll have to wait before I gush on over about that. But I'll always love this game, and even with the existence of the sequels, if you think from watching this horribly long-winded video that this sort of game might interest you, give it a try. Gosh and wow, after a whopping 5 months of working on this video, my first ever game review is finally complete! I spent so long working on this video that I decided from now on, I'm gonna wear a bright blue shirt. My left arm's already converted, but my right arm hasn't gotten the memo yet. Anyway, I'm absolutely positive with how long this video is that it is completely riddled with mistakes and errors, so please, feel free to slather my video with totally brutal and constructive criticism. I'd like to be able to improve and make videos that are bearable for people to watch. Also, I've already got the next few games planned, but if you so choose, feel free to recommend some games down yonder that I find some semblance of enjoyment from and aren't of triple essay length. Anyway, I sincerely hope you enjoyed this video, and if you didn't, oh well! And with that being said, it's time I take my leave. Valedictions!